Welcome to another beginner's guide. This one will feature the Skyway. And I brought a tougher character in just so he'd be a little safer while constructing it. I'm going to use this accessory shown here just to increase the speed at which I can lay blocks. That is purchased from the traveling merchant. It's not required, but it does make the job a little easier. So if you have one, I would recommend using it. And then I'm simply going to use dirt to do this. Why dirt? Well, it's found in abundance. In fact, it's probably the material you'll have the most of. So just keep in mind as you dig through the earth, as you start your game, you're probably going to want to save a number of stacks of earth, or dirt rather, because you will use several thousand, and yes, I said several thousand blocks of dirt to do this. Or if you use stone or some other material, you'll use several thousand blocks of that. Obviously, if you're in a smaller world, you won't use quite as many, but I like to use large worlds, and those do require quite a bit. Now, I wouldn't recommend climbing a rope all the way up to the space biome, but you're going to want to go up quite a ways just to get above any potential trees or mountains and that sort of thing. And so just use your best judgment for how high above the ground you want to go. As it turned out, this selection was just high enough, and we'll see in just a minute. Now, I like to crown the top of the rope with some torches just to make it easier to spot on the mini-map and just to kind of give it a little sense of theater. One of the best things to do actually is to build this during the nighttime. You don't have to, obviously, but I find that constructing a skyway at night allows me to place the torches more effectively. It gives you a much better sense of when to place the torches. And it pretty much goes like this for the entire map. You're going to want to build it in either direction, and at least in one of those two directions, you'll want to extend it all the way to the ocean biome. And why do we do this? Well, we do this just so that there's an unobstructed, smooth path to the east and to the west of your starting point. And it might seem like a lot of work, and it really is a decent amount of work, but think of it this way. Every block you place, you will no longer have to place again. And even if you just go halfway across the map with one of these east or west skyways, it means that you will get halfway across the map much more quickly, because as you saw when I laid the rope up to the entrance to this skyway, it took no time at all to get there. And remember what I said about how high you want to place this? I had no idea how high that giant tree there would be, but it worked out pretty well. It was just clearing these giant trees, which do admittedly go up quite a ways up into the air. So definitely don't shortchange yourself by planting these too low. The last thing you want to do is to run into a mountain or a tree. So try to put it a little high enough. It's more of an art than a science, because you know there's a lot of variability. Take a look at that. That's a fallen star, and I'll get into this right now. One of the other advantages of building a skyway is the fact that it's a great way to collect fallen stars. Now, fallen stars are used in a number of crafts. Probably the most important one is mana stars, which require either 3 or 5 fallen stars depending on your platform, and those increase your mana pool, shown on the far right. So fallen stars, at least early on, are useful for that craft, and then depending on what you want to do with them, you might use them for other things. So it's a great way to collect them as you speed along your skyway. And looking below, you'll see there was another tree below the eastern end of this bridge, so I think I judged the height just about right on this one. Now, one thing to keep in mind, it's a long way down, obviously, so be very careful when planting blocks. I've taken a tumble here and there before, and I'm not afraid to admit that. So one of the things that can help is that accessory I showed at the beginning of the video that was purchased from the traveling merchant. It lays the blocks that much faster that you're less likely to accidentally run over the edge of the skyway. So that'll keep you a little safer. But again, it's not required. It just makes things a little easier. And as we go along here, you can see the number of dirt blocks I have diminishing quite rapidly. And so, especially if you're on a larger world, I think it'll give you some sense of how quickly you exhaust an entire stack of dirt. So don't throw those dirt stacks away. Odds are you're going to accumulate quite a few of them as you go through the world and explore the underground. Just save those stacks for a rainy day, because They're a great material with which to build your sky bridge. It's cheap, it's abundant, and you're going to need a lot of something to build it. I would recommend dirt. And not just because of its abundance, but as we'll see in a little while, there's yet one more reason to use dirt blocks. But anyway, I'm going to go through the entire stack, and I think I'm nearly out of it at this point. What I like to do, and it's just optional, when I get to the end of my stacks and have to stop building for a while, I'll put a torch on the end of the construction just to kind of delineate the end. It's not required, but anyway, you know, even just one stack, although I went to the west a little bit, I've done most of the building to the east. You can see one stack. It doesn't get all the way across the world, but it's a good start, and it's not a terribly long construction job. I know a lot of people probably spend even more time doing things like fancy houses and that sort of thing, but for something as important as this, for getting from one side of the map to the other, it's not terribly bad, and so I would say it's definitely worth the effort. The other thing about the Skyway is the fact that you can find floating islands. Now, you'll have up to 4 islands on small worlds, up to 7 on medium worlds, and up to 8 floating islands on large worlds. The Skyway is a great way to locate these. In this particular world, I was a little unlucky. There didn't seem to be any near the spawning point, but it's totally random. They may be clustered together, they may not. And so I went to this other world, just to give an example of one right near the spawn. And this is another reason to build the Skyway, is because these floating islands contain houses with sky chests that contain one of 4 unique items. And these are very good items, especially if you get them early on. The Star Fury sword is excellent, but there are also a couple of accessories that I would recommend getting. And so that's yet another reason to build the Skyway. It makes them much easier to find. But getting back to why I would use dirt, other than some unsightly weeds, nothing grows on it except for strange plants. And strange plants do a number of things. First and foremost, if you have one in your inventory and you have an open house available for a new NPC, the dye trader can appear at your base. And if you give the dye trader strange plants, he can give you some fairly exotic dyes with which to color your weapons and equipment and that sort of thing. So they're good to have, and they also sell for, I believe, 20 silver. So it adds up over time if you're short on cash and just need to scrounge up some coin. It's a good way to collect them. So anyway, that's just one last advantage of using dirt that you wouldn't get if you'd, say, used stone to create this. And again, this is a different world than the initial world that I showed you. I loaded this one up just so you can see the floating islands, and from the minimap you can see that these are 2 clustered right near the spawn point and close to one another. Now, not all floating islands have houses on them. Some have floating lakes, and you can fish on them, and if you have the angler NPC, he may occasionally send you to a floating lake to catch a quest fish. So if you have access to one of these lakes, you can complete the quest. And so once again, that's another reason to build the Skyway, just for ease of access to those locations so that you can get those angler quests completed. I just wanted to demonstrate here the use of the Skyway to head east from my spawn. This is a large world, and I'm going to stop here and there to collect strange plants, just to give you an idea of how frequently these spawn. They do respawn as well. But this is, again, a large world on PC, so it's quite big. And I'm going to head east directly. And you can imagine if I didn't have this Skyway, and I was on foot or on a ground-based mount, you can imagine how much slower it would be to traverse to the east all the way to the ocean biome if I didn't have this Skyway. These things are really good, and in this particular world I actually got lucky in that I threaded the needle with the Skyway's altitude. It was below some floating islands, and it was actually above a couple of floating islands, which we'll see momentarily. And so if you find something of interest, such as a floating island, you can stop and build a rope up or down to it. If you find that you're above the dungeon entrance, you can carve a little opening in the Skyway and, again, put a rope down to it, or the same with the jungle or any other point of interest as you head either west or east And so it's a really good way to get from one point to the other before you get to the state of the game where you have the teleporter, which of course makes everything super fast if you put that infrastructure in. But this is a beginner's guide, and so I wanted to cover the Skyway because for the vast majority of your game, this is going to be the best solution for getting from one point to the other. And you know, the far reaches of your map are every time going to be ocean biomes. Ocean biomes are useful for a number of things. They're useful for angler quests because just like any other biome, they may feature a quest fish that you can only catch there. But it's also where you locate the angler initially. And it's also the place where you'll, in the later game, fight Duke Fisheron. So there's a lot to do in the ocean biomes, and you may just want to go there for other reasons like fishing, because it is a great place to fish. So whatever the reason you want to get from one place on the map to another and they're far apart, the Skyway is an excellent way to get from A to B. And it's an undertaking that I admit takes some time. It takes a lot of resources to do it, but those resources, as I've said, are dirt. You can use dirt, which is rather cheap. And so it's an investment in your future because odds are, if you're committed to a map, you're going to be playing it for a good number of hours. And you're basically investing in the future by putting a little time in initially. You'll have this Skyway, which will help you immensely over the course of, say, a few dozen hours on a particular map. And just one last thing I wanted to show off. This is not obviously a beginner boss. This is a mechanical boss. It's Skeletron Prime. You fight him in hard mode in the later part of the game, but I wanted to demonstrate how the Skyway isn't just about ease of navigation. You can also use it essentially as a boss arena. You can have arenas that are multi-leveled from up to down, and those work for some bosses, but for two in particular, I would say the Twins and Skeletron Prime, I think speed beats pretty much everything else. And so what I've found is I've used my Skyway to defeat both Skeletron Prime and the Twins with much greater ease than if it was just a more confined arena where you can't really get any great distance against those two bosses. So the Skyway is good for that, and so it's really the gift that keeps on giving. And while it might seem like a distraction from your exploration and equipment getting, I really do recommend it because it gives you ease of transportation, access to floating islands, it gives you this great boss arena, and it's also a source of fallen stars and strange plants. And so it's a really good combination of things, and I felt that it deserved its own video. So anyway, that's my spiel on Skyways. You can of course call them what you want. You can call them sky bridges, sky highways. I think Skyways is just a neat way to phrase it, but do as you will. Anyway, if you've stayed this long, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.